Hello watch enthusiasts. Now today I'd like to talk about several new releases this past month, and notably new releases from Elang and Zona, a very beautiful piece which is extremely ornate and wonderful to look at, as well as several new pieces from IWC and their Pilots line, which offer a great deal in terms of being slightly different in terms of their case format and material, thus making them more interesting to the buyer, as well as a very interesting pair of pieces from Vacheron Constantin, which really catch the air of 1940s dress watches, but bring them into the modern world, with new movements and a very nicely finished design. However, before I begin the video, I would like to encourage you all to join the Watch Guys, which is my group on Snups, the social media platform for sharing pictures of collections and interests, and where you can discuss matters of horology with myself and indeed other enthusiasts, and where I'll do my utmost to reply to any questions or video requests you happen to give me. Therefore, I would encourage you to follow the link down below or download the app, which is available for iOS or Android, depending on what you're using to be most convenient, and join the 700 or so others who are now using the group for these added features to really get the most out of the YouTube channel. Over the past few days, IWC have released a few new models of their Pilot range, and their Pilot range really has been a long-standing backbone to their watch range, for the simple reason that people do enjoy the curious and somewhat alien world of the sports watch, which isn't of any real use to the vast majority of people, but certainly is interesting to have on the wrist. And the first watch they've released is the new Mark 18, and they've kept the steel and ceramic versions released last year in the range, but now they've released a new vintage version with a titanium case. And this watch features the same aesthetic as the previous versions, with its 40mm case, anti-magnetic movement protection, as well as ETA-based movement. And the price has gone up slightly to $4,150 with this titanium case, but we also see various changes to the dial. Now, the hands of this watch are very beautifully blued and are filled with cream lume, which is, I feel, fitting for the fact that they're trying to make this watch more of a vintage-styled piece. And this also matches the dial with its cream lume and slightly more muted black, which I think fits the dial and the contrasting colour slightly better. Similarly, this does help with the way that 40mm titanium case looks, with its dark grey aesthetic and fully brushed surface. And this does in many ways make the watch's aesthetic far more simple and more muted and subdued. But certainly I think it does add something to the range for someone who wants something a little bit different and more tool-esque, whilst not losing any of the classic charm of this watch. Of course, the watch does retain the rather simple case and design, but I think the dial and the nicely embossed caseback really does help to bring out the watch a little bit, and make it a little bit more adventurous in terms of a timepiece which is traditionally very conservative and follows on from the Pilot's watches designed for the Allies in the Second World War, which, by comparison to the Big Pilot, which is designed to look like the Flieger watches or the Luftwaffe models, I suppose it does leave a sort of a strange concept, I suppose, in the design of these watches. Because, of course, you have these two contrasting branches of the same design for two different applications, but a fundamentally very similar purpose. Of course, alongside the smaller Mark 18, they have also released new versions of the Big Pilot, and they've released new titanium versions like the Mark 18, as well as a new bronze version. And I'll talk about the titanium version first, but the general specifications of both are a 46.2mm case, as is the case with all their other models in the Big Pilot range, as well as the caliber 52110. And this is a movement which has been seen previously in the Big Pilot range, and doesn't show an advance at all, but just a redesign, I suppose, of the case material. And the movement features a 7-day power reserve, which is quite remarkable, really, for an automatic movement, but I think is very fitting for a watch like this, which is designed to be a reliable instrument. And this does also feature its 7-day power reserve indicator at 3 o'clock, which is again beautifully detailed, and I think does add a certain amount of depth to the dial with its slightly dropped shape and its sunken relief. Similarly, this does feature the automatic Peloton winding system, which is proprietary to IWC and is only seen in their watches, which is again another detail which is very interesting and I think helps to justify the price of this watch, which in my eyes is still very high, but I think I can see why someone would particularly want one of these pieces. Now, the bead-blasted case in titanium is, in my eyes, quite an interesting piece, because it does offer a far more tool-like aesthetic to this watch, and previously seeing brushed versions of this watch, which aren't completely in keeping with the originals, which would have been bead-blasted or sand-blasted, I feel this is strangely more in keeping. Similarly, the titanium will also reduce the weight of this watch and make it more manageable for more wrists. And the dial with its vintage cream lume and rather beautifully blued hands I think adds all the more to this watch, with its date at 6 o'clock, which again sinks out of the way on the dial, and draws the eye further to that central axis of the central hands, as well as that power reserve indicator. In terms of specifications, the watch does feature, as I've said, their in-house movement, but also is water resistant to 60 metres, which is a strange depth, I suppose, because it's not one of the industry standards, though I nonetheless would have no doubt in this watch being able to perform to these levels. But certainly with its large crown, I can see why that would be a point of water ingress, so it's pleasant to know that they've put a certain degree of water resistance on these watches. And of course they also do feature the anti-magnetic properties of the Mark 18, which are again beneficial for an owner. Now alongside this piece comes a rather beautiful limited edition, and one which I didn't think I would like, but I must say I think is very much growing on me. And this is the bronze version, and costing the same price of $13,200 as the titanium model, but in this case is limited to 1,500 pieces. And this is identical in terms of its size, movement, shape, as well as dial design, but it does feature that very distinctive bronze case, as well as bronze rivets and a bronze buckle on the strap. In terms of the case itself being the only difference between these two watches, I can see why bronze is a good idea for this watch, because it does work with that vintage style of this piece, which is really inherent in the design, and has always been clear to see. Additionally, the case is bead blasted in a similar way to the titanium version, and I must say I think it would have been nice though to see a brushed model, because it does add a certain refinement to this watch, and bearing in mind the colour is already different, it would be nice to see a more fine finishing. Although that said, I suppose you could say the gold version is the one for people who want that fine finishing, though of course the price difference is so significant, I wouldn't say that's a very useful argument. But nonetheless, I think for someone who is very much interested in pilot's watches, and luxury pilot's watches at that, these certainly do offer a wonderful option as far as a piece with the cold aesthetic of titanium, or the very warm bronze, but both with that warm luminescent material, beautiful blued hands, and that wonderful concentric pattern on the sub-dial with the power reserve. Now, Vacheron Constantin have also released a few very interesting watches this month, and notably two new models which I'd like to talk about today. And these are models in the Historique model range of watches produced by the brand, and these are the triple calendar versions, the 1942 and the 1948. Now the 1942 is a very interesting piece, because it's based on the 4240 from 1942, as the name would imply. And this does include various interesting details which hinge on the movement of this watch, as well as the very interesting features and design this watch is designed to mimic. Now the dimensions of the case come in at 40mm by 10.35mm, making it a very conservative size and nothing too large, though nonetheless 40mm does seem rather large for a piece designed to replicate these vintage dress watches. Though nonetheless it's beautifully made, and in steel I feel they really have hit the nail on the head, because often steel watches can look a bit harsh because they don't have the soft tone of white gold, but they really have managed to counteract that with these wonderful style of claw lugs, which extend out of the sides of the case, which is generally this round and slightly ridged form, with slight details on the sides of the case, and a crown which protrudes ever so slightly at 3 o'clock. And the dial of the watch is really a beautiful piece, and in fact is my favourite part of the watch entirely. And we have this relatively flat, matted base to the dial, which is this wonderful cream colour, which I feel works extremely well with the very 30s style of numerals running around its edge, which look almost hand-etched. Additionally, you do see the applied Vacheron Constantin logo at 12 o'clock, a little reminder that this watch is a modern timepiece. Furthermore, you do see the small seconds at 6 o'clock, which is a large sub-dial, and I think matches the size of the dial very well to not make the watch appear too large, by producing a larger sub-second dial. Additionally, you see a triple calendar on the dial, with these unframed apertures at 12 o'clock, which show the day of the week and the month, which I feel are very welcome on this watch, and due to their unframed detailing, match the dial due to its printed aesthetic, rather than an applied style. Now the hands are also a nice detail in blued steel, with a very slim long minute hand and a slightly wider and shorter hour hand. I feel the aesthetic is perfectly hit. Furthermore, the date hand is very nicely finished again with brushed steel and a red tip. And this does lead on to the two dial versions, because you can either get a version with a blue style of text around the edge of the dial for the day of the month, as well as the writing for the day of the week, as well as the month. Or you can also get blue, so it's blue or red really, which does offer, I feel, a very attractive option for those who prefer each colour, and considering the fact that these colours were offered in the day, it's very much in keeping. Now by contrast to this model, which is powered by the calibre 4400QC, with 65 hours power reserve and that wonderful style of triple calendar, we'd also see the 1948, which doesn't have those large claw style of lugs, but a more subdued form, but retains the 40mm diameter. Additionally, this is only available in 18 karat pink gold, and is limited to 400 pieces, 200 per style. and this features the caliber 4400 QCL, which is the same 65-hour power reserve manually wound movement, but now with a moon phase as well. With the dial of the 1948, we see further changes, because gone are those beautiful painted numerals and the blued hands, and in their place now sit these wonderful applied numerals and indices, which are very different, but in my eyes do fit the gold watch very well, and I think that producing the same dial would seem a bit overpowering if painted in gold. Similarly, you also do see that moon phase at 6 o'clock integrated into that subdial, which I think works extremely well with a very three-dimensional finish to that moon phase disc. Additionally, you do see gold hands in the same style, as well as gold framing around those apertures for the triple calendar. Furthermore, you do also see some adjustment in terms of the way the dial, I feel, sits, because you do see a less cluttered dial, but of course with the same aesthetic, and I feel the same detailing, as well as the fact that you can as well choose between the blue and the red for that external ring. And the pricing of this watch does represent, I feel, its place above the 1942. Because in gold it costs $35,000 for either of the versions, whilst the steel 1942 costs $19,500, which is still an incredibly high and large amount of money, but certainly if you're in the market for something of real delicate nature and beautiful finishing, this is certainly an interesting option, and I feel one which I think will become very popular, along with the 1921 models, which have become extremely well regarded. I feel these may well be another classic of their range. This month we've also seen a very interesting release from Nomos, and those who watch my channel regularly will know that I have a great admiration for Nomos and the design of their watches, along with the innovation they put into them. And to honour the first year anniversary of their sales in Singapore, to which previous to this time in 2016 there was no brick and mortar shop selling these watches, they've decided to produce a limited edition version of their Weltzeit range in the Zurich model liner. And this is a piece which honours Singapore specifically, and features a very interesting movement, the DUW 5201. At 39.9mm, this watch is a very wearable size, with those long flowing lugs extending out and giving this watch a very slim and carefully delicate design. Similarly, you have the crown placed atop a sort of a mount on the side of the case, which again makes it jut out a bit more and extends the size of this watch, which emphasises how slim it is. Additionally, you do have a pusher at 2 o'clock, and this controls the GMT function. The setup for the GMT function on this watch is truly unique, because you have this ring in a style which is most known to world timers around the edge of the dial, which you press the pusher at 2 o'clock to control to move forward one. And this is synchronised with the 24-hour wheel at 3 o'clock, and this turns to demonstrate what time it is on the 24-hour scale in that particular location, giving you a very clear indication of the time there, and a very simple and easy change of location. And this makes this watch pretty much perfect for someone who isn't necessarily travelling, but someone who wants to know what time it is around the world, such as a businessman or a stockbroker, for instance. And so as a result, this does make this watch a very interesting dress watch, because it re-establishes what the purpose of a GMT or world timer is. Two versions of this watch are available within the 50 which are going to be made. So 35 are going to be made with a very traditional Nomos style of silvered dial, and the other with this very rustic style of salmon dial, which has this discoloration which is typical on vintage watches, and does lend to this watch looking a little bit more old-fashioned, though in my eyes doesn't tie in that well with the Singapore connection of this watch, and indeed the clear and simple aesthetic that Nomos have always put forward. And so as a result, in my eyes, my favourite is the silver dial version, but I can certainly see why someone would want something a little bit more different, and with a somewhat unique design. Of course, Nomos have made some very specific changes as well to the layout of the dial, for the simple reason they wanted to again draw the attention of the buyer or the user to Singapore itself. So firstly, they've replaced Hong Kong in its respective time zone with Singapore in red, again to draw images of the city itself. And then as well as that, you do also see the red dot instead of the normal house or time zone indicator at 3 o'clock, which is again another nod to Singapore as a whole, which is a small bit of detailing which I feel is very appropriate, and Nomos have done very tastefully to further the sort of the Singaporean perception of this watch. The DUW 5201 movement is, however, the real pièce de résistance in this watch, with a beautiful level of decoration on really all of the surfaces of it, and of course with their custom rotor again adorning this beautiful in-house movement. Furthermore, it does also feature the very particular movement feature, I suppose, that Nomos have, which is their own swing system, which is their own escapement and balance section, which would normally be brought in from other brands on most in-house movements. For example, Omega have it made specifically by ETA for them. Whereas here Nomos are producing it themselves, which is very, very costly and very rare amongst smaller brands, and so as a result does further increase the image and perception of Nomos as a whole, as a very major brand and one which is truly growing. The penultimate watch in this list really does have a name to match its price tag, with the name being the A. Lange & Söhne 1815 Rattrapant Perpetual Calendar Handwerkskunst. And this is a piece which is truly incredible. It features really every innovation that, or at least every functional innovation that A. Lange & Söhne could have put into this watch, and is a real demonstration of their strength in terms of technical prowess, as well as their innovation in terms of the delicate touches to watches, which are very clearly seen on this timepiece. At 41.9mm across and 15.8mm high, this is a very large watch, and certainly does appear so when seen on the wrist. But that said, this watch is designed to be a technical demonstration, and isn't necessarily designed to be part of their normal range, being a very, very limited run of timepieces. The case of the watch is white gold, and features brushed and polished surfaces which do break up the profile of the watch and show the different levels in its design. But of course the dial is the bit where people are going to be drawn in, because it truly is a gorgeous piece of design with this 4 sub-dial layout, which are needed really for the amount of complications on this timepiece. Of course, the primary purpose for this watch is to be a chronograph, and this is a rattrapant chronograph. That's to say a split-second chronograph, where you can pause the secondary second hand on a particular time, so that you can time two things at the same time, or stop at intervals within timing a longer period. And this is shown by the two second hands which operate from the centre of the dial, as well as at 12 o'clock we see the minutes for the rattrapant chronograph, which reads to 30 minutes. We also see the power reserve indicator for that 42-hour power reserve of this watch at that 12 o'clock position. Furthermore, at the 3 o'clock position, we do also see the inclusion of the leap year, which again is also shown with the months on this side of the dial for that perpetual calendar. At 6 o'clock we do also see the moon phase of this watch and the running seconds, bearing in mind that the central seconds are the chronograph. At 9 o'clock we see the most conventional sections of the watch, which are the date and the day of the week. And it's remarkable to be able to say that these are very conventional setups for one of these watches, bearing in mind the fact that the complications on the watch are truly incredible, and even more impressive when you see the fact that they're all included into one movement. The dial itself could also be seen as a true success of this watch, because you have this beautiful surface to it, which is created through the use of relief engraving. And this is where, from the white gold base of the dial, they're able to engrave these beautiful and truly very, very delicate stars and constellations. And it's not the case they stamp these out of the surface of the dial, but they actually engrave all of the white gold out from around them, which is a very lengthy and very time-consuming process, but was the only way of getting this sort of decoration. Of course, that blue surface is achieved through the use of dark blue enamel, which is poured into the dial, and creates this wonderful submersion and semi-transparent finish, which makes a great sheen, and I suppose again shows the innovation, but even further than that, the craftsmanship that goes into a piece of this type. The case back of the watch is also similarly impressive, with a half-hunter design, which means that it's hinged, and this allows the case back of the watch to open up to show the movement itself behind a sapphire crystal. But that case is also beautiful, with a white gold engraving, a relief engraving of the moon goddess Luna, and this again ties into the nighttime aesthetic, or at least the idea of this watch being a celestial marvel. And this is surrounded by decoration and, again, relief engraving into the white gold of the case, of clouds and stars, which are, again, filled in with that beautiful blue enamel. And this gives us just a fantastic view of the case back of the watch, and I feel is something which is very rarely seen, and I would love to see more enamel in the world of watches, because it does give such a wonderful sheen which can't be achieved in any other way. The movement is an absolute thing of beauty, with these silver bridges which are decorated in a gorgeous way with these stars, which makes for a very complete package as far as the watch is made in terms of decoration. Additionally, it features a very deep style of build, which means that you can see into the movement very clearly around those bridges. And this is one of the few watches in the world which, due to its rattrapant style of chronograph, features 2 column wheels. Again, another quirk to see in the case back, and another beautiful thing to see when engaging the chronograph, if you happen to do that when it's off the wrist. Furthermore, you do get such a fantastic view due to the cutouts in the movement of those 631 components within the movement, which is just incredible in this L101.1 caliber, which, though manually wound, is certainly a very versatile movement, and of course is the very pinnacle of high horology, and isn't meant to be a sort of a technical piece as far as being robust. But in terms of the records of A-Lange & Söhne movements, they are known to be very, very well made and very sturdy and long-lasting, which is a quirk, I suppose, to the fact that these watches are so ornately built. Of course, to match the incredibly large name and incredible number of features of this watch comes an incredible price point. And the price of this watch is €290,000, which is an obscene amount of money to spend on a watch, but it does show the craftsmanship and care and the amount of money that has clearly been used to produce a watch of such incredible detailing and such incredible innovation. And so I think it's wonderful that these things exist, though of course I couldn't bring myself to spend that sort of money. It's incredible to see these watches on photographs, and indeed to be able to see them annually at Baselworld, for instance. Now, the last watch I'd like to talk about is one which was just recently sold at auction for a record price, and this is the 1982 George Daniels Space Traveller. This was originally brought to fame, or at least into public eye, by Theodor Bayer, the owner of chronometry Bayer Zurich, who over dinner in Zurich in the mid-1980s tried to purchase, and admittedly it took quite a lot of convincing, to purchase this watch from George Daniels himself, and it wasn't indeed designed to be his own watch, and not designed to be a sales product, but rather a personal piece. And it was originally sold as a simple piece from friend to friend, but in this day and age it's become an incredibly valuable piece because of the technology that went into it. So it features two separate going trains, which I'll talk about in a moment, which drive through a single balance wheel. And one of these trains tells mean solar time based upon the time the sun takes to reach zenith to zenith, so going from the middle of the sky to the middle of the sky throughout those 24 hours, whilst the other one features sidereal time. And sidereal time is based upon the time it takes for a single star in the sky to move from its zenith to zenith in the sky. And due to the fact that the Earth is moving as well as the Sun, there's a certain parallax effect with regards to solar time, which makes the solar day ever so slightly longer than the sidereal day. And this is again an interesting detail which shows why both of these were shown on this watch on different displays. Furthermore, you do also have a chronograph which, depending on what the user selects, can either time in sidereal or solar time, which is a further quirk of this level of high horology, where actually standard timekeeping is thrown out the window in favour of these interesting innovations. And this completely handmade watch, which may well have taken about 3,000 hours to produce, has in fact now sold for £3.2 million at Sotheby's. And this incredible piece really does, I feel, show the appeal, I suppose, of these curious creations to the great, or at least the most wealthy of watch collectors. And of course, for a handmade watch by George Daniels, this certainly is an incredible piece, and has been made with all the delicate touches of a classical watch, but of course in most recent years, which is a strange juxtaposition, I suppose, of these different styles, and certainly does show the interest that people still have in high horology. Anyway though, I'll conclude this video here, but thank you very much for watching, and please do like, share and subscribe to help the channel and to enjoy more content here in future. Also, do please leave your comments on what you think of the various watches I've shown in this video in the comments down below, and indeed on Snups for us all to read, and indeed to learn about what you really think of these consumer watches, from the Bell & Rosses with fairly simple movements, through to that George Daniels with a truly incredible piece of innovation within it. So thank you very much for watching. This is Armand the Watch Guy, over and out.